My name's Steve Ball, and I have this vintage 1980 Lloyd Shores built sprint car that I had built for me back in 1980, and been sitting around for a while. It's got a pretty neat history. I would like to restore it. I've been collecting parts for quite a few years, but when this car was built, I ran it just a couple of seasons. It hasn't been run since 1982. It's got a pretty neat story behind it that includes an opportunity to run an Indy car. We used the engine out of it in an Indy car. It's involved in some lawsuits and some disagreements with sponsors. It ended up tied up in a divorce that I went through, and I ended up having to sell it due to a custody battle. And about 10 years after I sold it, I ended up getting it back. The guy that bought it from me was murdered, and it changed hands a couple of times, but it's never been driven by anybody except me. It's only been run just those first few seasons, and I would really like to submit this to the Garage Squad to help me rebuild it. I'll show you a little bit around it, and the car is special because it's got an aluminum handmade body. There were only 5 of these cars built, and to my knowledge this is the only one that still exists that is all original. And I'll show you some of the parts that I have for it. This is the engine block for the Shores Sprint car. It's a 350 Chevy block, which is what pretty much everybody was running back in those days. There was a 355 cubic inch limit. I've just started doing the machine work and so forth on it. I've got the pistons and rods that are just like the ones that were run back in the 1980s, and crankshaft. I still have the original heads that we ran on this car. I can show you some of those parts too. Okay. These are all the parts that I've collected for the Shores car. I have the original in and out box for it. They don't run in and out boxes anymore. They haven't run them for quite a few years. In fact, they were kind of going out of style when that car was built. Got some of the original shock absorbers, the rocker arms, push rods, the belt drive, the Hillborn fuel pump, front cover, the power steering, and these are the original Brodex heads that we ran on the car, and an oil pan. So I've got most of the parts, a couple of different camshafts we could put in it. Just have to get the machine work finished up, and we can get the motor put together fairly quickly. These are some pictures of some of the first cars, race cars that I drove. I drove quite a few cars that were not the best cars, not the best funded cars. These are some of the ones I started out with, and then finally I got a sponsor, and I ended up getting this car, which was my first, the blue 95 car over here. That was my first car that I ran the United States Auto Club with, and this is my first race. While passing for the lead. The guy hit me, ran me into the wall, flipped end over end, and those pictures are, I don't know, about a week or so after I got out of the hospital. And that car was destroyed. We rebuilt it twice that season, but the car was bent up so bad, that's what prompted us to have the Shores pavement car built, because that one was not repairable. Then here's some pictures of the Indy car I was talking about. That the Shores pavement car gave me an opportunity to get into an Indy car, and the reason I did that is because USAC tried to set up rules for Indy cars where everybody could run or had to run stock block engines. So we were able to take the engine out of that Shores pavement car and put it in this Indy car. However, the sponsor that I had turned out to kind of be a crook. We were entered for the Indy 500. I even had a garage assignment there for 1981. And the sponsor and car owner was arrested for income tax evasion. And they froze all his bank accounts and put him in jail. And so while he was in jail, I took the car myself to the Pocono 500. Those are pictures where it's number 85. And I ran the Pocono 500 on my own when the car owner was in jail. And that turned out to be the only IndyCar race I got to run. But what got me that opportunity was driving that Shores pavement car, winning the championship in that Shores pavement car, and then that got me the opportunity to run the Indy cars. All right, these are some pictures of when the car was first built. I think this was the first full season. We only got to run a couple of races the first season that it was built, because there's a whole story behind that. Like I said, there were 5 of these cars built. We made the mistake of buying and paying for the car in full, and we found out that he would start a car for us, somebody else would come in, he would sell the car to them, and then he would start another car for us. So it took us about 6 or 7 months to finally get the car, and then it wasn't complete. I finally just went down there and took the car myself and finished the car myself. But these are pictures from that championship season. We ran the International Car Owners Auto Racing Association, and we had about 20 races in that series, and I ended up winning the championship. To start out that season, we went out to Phoenix. This is a picture from the Phoenix Mile. We went out to the Copper Classic race that they have at Phoenix every year, at least they did back then, and we ended up running second. We put our car in with Glenn Neipel, who's was a real well-known car owner. He's kind of the car owner that made Tony Stewart famous, and his car is a yellow number 20 in the picture up there. Anyway, we teamed up and towed both cars out to Phoenix. He won the race, and I finished a very close second. We had a very close battle for the last several laps, and I couldn't get around him, so he ended up winning, and I ended up finishing second. After I won that championship, the car ended up only being run a couple of more seasons. The season after I won the championship, we took it to the Little 500, and I qualified second fast, but I didn't qualify till the second day. And their rules are that the first 16 qualifiers the first day are locked in. So I ended up having to start the race in 17th position. And unfortunately, when they dropped the green flag, the throttle stuck wide open, and I ended up running over several cars, hitting the wall really hard, and broke the fuel pump off the front of it. while it was full of fuel. Fuel started running down the track. Car caught on fire, had the whole end of the track on fire. I was able to get out of the car, but the car was completely burned up. So I had to completely rebuild the car. All new paint and everything, and all the rubber was melted, and had it all rebuilt. And then the last race of the year, I took it to Sandusky, and I was running third with 3 laps to go, and the motor exploded and shattered the drive line, took a little chunk out of my ankle, and but I was running really well there. The car was always really competitive. We did some, if you notice that it does have a wing on it right now. We did run some races with wings and some without wings. Right now the wing on it is stored on there because that is the original wing. The newer wings nowadays are a lot lighter. But after I destroyed the whole engine and driveline, shortly after that is when I kind of went through the divorce and also the problems with the sponsor, and ended up in a lawsuit that went on for a couple of years, and we finally got that settled. And obviously I got the car out of it, plus several other things. And then shortly after we got that, that's when I ended up in a divorce and a custody battle for my son. And I was just financially in really bad shape at that point, and I had to pay attorney's fees. So I ended up selling the car along with a street rod that I had, and I sold it to a guy named Dave Hodson out of Richmond, Indiana. And I heard a few years later that he had been murdered. He owned a liquor store down there, and somebody came in to rob him and shot him and killed him. And then probably about 10 years later, somebody contacted me, and I forget what the guy's name was, unfortunately, but he wanted to restore the car and wanted to know if I had pictures. So I said sure, and I asked him if I could come see the car, which I did, and I ended up buying it back. And this is the way it was when I bought it back, which was almost 20 years ago now that I bought it back. It's been sitting around, and this was the way Dave Hodson had painted the car, but he had never had it lettered and never got it on the racetrack. And so the car's pretty special to me, and I would really like to get it restored and put back together and take it to some of the vintage race exhibitions that they let the cars go out and run around the track. And so that's my goal, and that's what I've been working towards for the last 20 years. And this is the point that I am right now, and just having a little bit of trouble finding the time and the money to complete it.
Good.
Well, again, I'd really like to get this Shores sprint car rebuilt. This is my shop in Huntington, Indiana. We're still involved in some racing and so forth, and that's kind of why that I haven't had time to get the thing rebuilt. I've been trying to for quite a few years. These cars are projects I've also got that we're trying to get done. This car is for my granddaughter, belongs to my son, and then that Falcon over there is also another project that I've got that I've been trying to get done. So you can see I've got an awful lot to do, and it probably won't get done for years, if ever, without your help. So I would really like it if you would consider one of these projects for your garage squad show.